Hi, everybody. Welcome to the May Sisters in Crime Heart of Texas chapter meeting. Glad to have you all here. I have a few announcements to get us started. If you are members of the national organization, you should be receiving an email that's somehow titled NFN, which means News from National. If you're not looking at those, you really should, because they've got some good stuff going on right now. There's an auction going on through the end of today, that benefits the Innocence Project, where they're auctioning off things like different authors coming to your book talks and doing book talks for you, or giving critiques, or just all sorts of things. So take a look at the auction if you're interested. That is an immediate past president project for the last president of the national organization. The immediate past president usually stays on the board for a year and does a project. And one of the other projects that just came out is the book Promophobia. And if you need help with your promotion of your work, Sisters in Crime has put out a whole book to help you with it. It's called Promophobia. The national organization has write-ins going on. The Dorothy Salisbury Davis Emergency Fund has become a rolling application. So if you have a monetary emergency and you need help, you might need to check out that fund. There are online webinars. There's an online craft course coming up. So yes, check out your News from National. There's lots of great things going on. Let's see, what else did I want to tell you about? Next month in June, we will be having Donna Marie Miller. She's going to talk about how to interview, record, and transcribe interviews about true crime. She will discuss her research and interviewing processes for writing about true crime. As a former reporter who previously covered crime news at 3 different Texas daily newspapers, including the El Paso Herald-Post, the El Paso Times, and Amarillo Globe News, she devised a method of recording her interviews before transcribing them into Word documents to create hybrid narratives. She's the author of 2 nonfiction books, Texas Secessionist Standoff, the 1997 Republic of Texas War, published in December 2022, and The Broken Spoke, Austin's Legendary Honky Tonk, published in April of 2017. So she's coming next month. Today, we have Hector Gomez, who is going to talk about the intersection of security and our courtrooms. He's open to talking about the witness protection program, fugitive apprehension, security issues in big name court cases. And let's see here, what can I say about Hector? In 2005, he established the Lone Star Fugitive Task Force. His career highlights in the U.S. Marshal Service include security during high-profile criminal trials involving outlaw motorcycle gangs, narcotics cartels, organized crime, white supremacists, John Gotti, Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, and Timothy McVeigh. He's been involved in the Witness Security Division, which is WITSEC. And after a 31-year career with the U.S. Marshal Service, he retired in 2017 to his current role, where he assists our courts in security and emergency preparedness. So please welcome Hector Gomez.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me today. It's going to be an interesting 30, 45 minutes, certainly. If you have any questions, throw a hand up. This is very informal. We're just a Sunday afternoon, just getting to know each other and talking war stories from my end. But again, briefly, I did retire after a 31-year career with the Marshal Service, assigned to McAllen, Brownsville, Denver, and DC, and here in Austin back in '94 when I got back home. I'm originally from Lockhart, Texas. Have a little ranch over there right now with some cows on it that keeps me busy on the weekend. And of course, kind of some of the stories I'm going to mention to you, some of the cases that I was involved in or led. You may have heard of them. They're all going to be local cases here that had obviously some impact in the community in terms of the profile, the type of cases that were involved in at the time, just the mere violent nature of these cases. Some aren't so. So certainly let's get off with the first story. Well, let me go back a little bit before we get into stories. My tour in the Witness Security Division was brief. It was several years, and pretty much what we do there, so I can get that all out. 'Cause I can't get into the details, obviously, but generally speaking, there's an agreement with witnesses to bring them into the program if they agree to testify. Generally, that will involve either the witness, what we call the principal, or the family members. So they're essentially relocated, redocumented, and that is a lifetime agreement. Now, at some point in time, they will be released from that agreement if if we, in our view, have determined that they can sustain themselves and become a viable, productive citizen in the United States, that we will essentially come to an agreement that we're going to end our protection responsibility, let them again sustain independence and integrate themselves into the community. If something were to happen down the road, then we would pay them a visit and say, you know what, you probably need to come back and get you moved on. So that is generally, it's changed since I've been there. I'm sure it has with the introduction of social media and technology, much like anything else. So having been out of that function for several years, I'm sure it's just changed immensely. But principally, the Marshal Service has essentially a couple of principal responsibilities. That's protection of the judiciary as the main function of the Marshal Service, and fugitive apprehension. Now, over the years, as anything else, law enforcement has evolved. Of course, the old more gets put on your plate. So over time, in addition to the witness security mission in the 60s, after organized crime was kind of a big thing, and that's how the program was developed. It was actually an offshoot from organized crime. The organized crime cases back in New York back in the 60s. And then, of course, that evolved into Pablo Escobar and the cocaine cartels, which were principally kind of the folks I dealt with in my era, or a lot of the witnesses coming in from the Pablo Escobar days, I want to call it, the massive cocaine cartels. And in doing so, the Marshal Service also, they added asset seizure, forfeiture, and of course, auctioning of seized assets. Serving papers, responding to national riots, hurricanes, natural disasters, things of that nature. LA riots, I was sent to LA back in the day, back in '92. As part of per a directive from President George Bush at the time. So there are a lot of things that are thrown on our plate at the last minute. Sometimes it just doesn't fit. It doesn't belong to the FBI, the DEA, the ATF. Let's throw it in the Marshals. So Marshals do get a lot of things thrown at them that they just have to adapt and accept, such as let's say the abortion clinics, when they were shooting doctors and they were bombing abortion clinics. The Marshal Service were involved in what's called the FACE Act at the time, the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances. So we would post at various abortion providers, clinics, and have to make sure that at least the woman had the right to walk in that front door. And then there's a lot of projects, missions, and things like that, again, that get thrown on us that we have to adapt and just kind of, we're the first ones that have to deal with it. But I mean, everybody likes the fugitive story. So let me get into that. Again, some of the local cases here that'll had some impact will be the Dennis Wayne Harvey case. Dennis Wayne Harvey. Now, all these fugitives, I'm going to quickly talk about, well, I won't say quickly, but at least there's going to be 5 significant fugitive cases that I think we weren't, a little, certainly the public should be well aware of kind of what was involved in these cases and how at the end there was, despite victims, obviously in these particular cases, there was a happy ending back in. But Dennis Wayne Harvey's and all these cases you can Google, they're still very active in the web in terms of looking at some of the detail. But Dennis Wayne Harvey was a 2005 case here in Austin, actually out there by 620 and right at the Williamson County, Travis County line on 620. And Dennis Wayne Harvey was recently paroled from TDC. And there was a lady who was leaving her home, driving out towards approaching 620 at the stoplight. And Dennis Wayne Harvey came from nowhere with a weapon at her and carjacked her vehicle, wanted her vehicle. He threw her out of the car, threw her to the ground, and Harvey got inside the car, and it was one of those cars, because he had been locked up for a while, that he didn't know you had to push the button to turn the car off. So he's looking for keys, and he's asking her where the keys are. And she's telling him there are no keys, there are no keys. So he pulls his weapon out and shoots her. She survives, and Dennis Wayne Harvey gives up and he runs across the highway, across 620, and carjacks another vehicle. Takes that vehicle, getting out of town. So as he's on the run and everybody's responding to her, again, she survives. Dennis Wayne Harvey is eventually apprehended several months later. And we'll get into that in a minute, but this was the first time we actually used the old program, America's Most Wanted. And we said, you know what, this case was so significant, it just raw, just an awful case. You know, lady just getting shot, you know, point blank range over her car, a guy. And of course, the backstory, he's just released out of TDC, mere weeks. He already has a weapon, and he's right back onto, you know, that crime spree. So he takes the car, takes off. He is eventually apprehended off the coast of Georgia, off Savannah, Georgia, in a shrimp boat. And we did profile him on America's Most Wanted. We also had what we call trap and trace devices installed on his mother's phone. His mother lived, if I recall, in Palacios, Texas. And that's where Harvey cut his teeth in the shrimping industry near Palacios, where he was from. And we got tips, as with anything else, you know, hundreds and thousands of tips that we had to try to get through here in Austin and work through to try to find something viable. And all of a sudden, I can't recall, I want to say it was that Christmas, a birthday, I can't recall right now, but there was some significant day where that old Dennis Harvey called, he borrowed a phone from the shrimp boat captain, called his mother, and whistles and bells come out. So we get a general location of where that phone call terminated. It terminated at a home specific in Palacios, but it also we found that it originated right outside Savannah. So we were able to identify where the phone call originated from. And we paid a visit to that location, and we were able to get show some pictures around and have actually the wife of the shrimp boat captain confirm, oh yeah, he's on the boat. She never knew anything about his background, but she goes, oh yeah, he's with my husband for the last couple of weeks on the boat. So once we kind of had those pieces put together, we called our counterparts in Savannah, and I said, this is the problem. You just got to find that boat, you know, in the Atlantic, in the waters of the Atlantic somewhere, find it. But they did. One of the deputy marshals that was from Savannah happened to be a reserve Coast Guardsman. So of course he pops a phone and calls his buddies at the Coast Guard, and all of a sudden it's like they're on it, and they find the boat within hours and take him to custody. And if you actually Google this case, you can see him being taken into custody. Well, they show the boat because of course the Coast Guard, what they did is they took pictures, just pictures of them approaching the boat. And then officers on the boat taking custody of him, putting him on the boat, bringing him back to shore. And you see this, his hands are behind him, and he's right on the boat dock, and he's got that look like, he's got that look. Some of them just have that look, and he clearly had it. And that was his downfall. You know, we tend to find in the fugitive business that crooks tend to do a couple of things. They call mom, they call their significant other, they call their girlfriends. You can always count on that, because life as a fugitive is tough unless you actually have the financial means. And it's almost like you almost have to be in the witness security program. You have to lay low and commit to that real straight, that new lifestyle going forward. You know, when you can't communicate with You have to have the fiscal means to stay on the land for a while, and it's tough. You just can't do it. It's very tough. Some are good at it. Some fugitives are good at it. I'll give them credit. There are a few that, can maintain themselves in a fugitive status for quite a while. They can also, some of them are smart enough to flee to countries where there's no extradition treaty with the United States. So those are those kind of issues, and you're going to see some of these cases here that where we've actually run into that problem. So the Dennis Wayne Harvey was a quick case in terms of it took a few months to get him into custody, but it just shows the ability that we were able to use America's Most Wanted, that we were able to use the long arm of the law, that is the Coast Guard, that long reach to get out there in the Atlantic to go find that boat. So, and when you take a local case that happened right here in Austin, and you have all these resources, essentially a local case has the ability to have national resources, and in some cases international resources, to go and reach out, touch them, and bring them back. And the task force, I'll get in. Let me explain what the task force is, because that's important. We never had a task force, a fugitive task force here in the Austin area until 2005, when I formed it here in Austin. And it was essentially, can we all agree to work together? Can we get away from the territorial mentality of, this is my backyard, Travis County, my backyard, Austin, my back. These territorial, because granted, cops by their very nature are like that. They don't want you, encroaching into their area. I think 9/11 changed that. It forced us. We had to get along. We have to share information. And of course, I believe, my view that the task force was a concept from being able to see if we can get along to actually seeing the benefits of getting along. And to this day, this task force still exists. Now, we're not the only one in the nation. We have stood up. Well, there are 94 judicial districts in the nation. So you want to say at a minimum, there are 94 intergovernmental task forces led by the Marshal Service, where they're made up of state and local municipal police officers, other federal agencies, county agencies, state agencies that participate in human resources, fiscal resources, technology, because everyone comes to the table bringing their expertise in a certain area. Marshal Service brings the infrastructure, just again, that reach, that global reach, if we need to, technology. The locals know their own backyard. They know exactly who the players are, good, bad, and indifferent. So everybody brings something to the table. And that task force, again, has been around since 5. The mandate of that task force is to attack and go after violent crime reduction. It's a violent crime reduction initiative. Go after gang members, reduce the warrant backlog, because every community has a warrant backlog. There are offenders out there that haven't been held to account. Their warrant goes into a system, in an NCIC system, and maybe an officer will pull them over down the highway on a traffic stop. What we do, what task forces are designed to do, are go after the worst of the worst. Who are our community's worst offenders? Who are those that pose the highest degree of risk to our community, as well as to law enforcement if they're encountered out there on a highway one night? So as a force multiplier, we come running and gunning instead of a 2-man or a 1-on-1 tactic. We go with an army of 10, 12. If we want to reduce that ability for that fugitive to run, engage us in any type of violent encounter, because we are all very well prepared for that engagement. So that is, if you even see today some of the media nationwide, these task forces, that's exactly what's happened nationwide. These task forces have been developed all over the nation to respond. Any questions on that? Okay, Colton Petoniak, that's another case. Colton Aaron Petoniak. Anybody recall that case?
Mhm.
Okay. The bullet summary on the Colton Petoniak case: he was a UT student. He killed his girlfriend, Jennifer Cave. He had a little help from another girlfriend by the name of Lauren Hall. They were all UT students out in West Campus. Jennifer Cave, the victim, had a practice of calling her mother, I want to say daily. She was from Corpus Christi. The mother had not heard from Jennifer in a while, a couple of days, which was unusual. So the family came up from Corpus to Austin to look for her, and they came to her apartment. And the husband, the stepfather, knocked on the door, no one would answer, so he went ahead, they called APD, APD responded, and they didn't have grounds to go in. But the stepfather said, "Well, I'm going in," he goes in, he finds Jennifer in the bathtub, very dead. She had been dead for a while, a couple of days, and she was tortured severely, severed in some places. As the investigation kind of centered on Colton Petoniak also was an honor student. I mean, he was a very intelligent person. Focused on him, and it focused on him and Lauren Hall at the beginning. And a warrant was cut for Colton Petoniak. There was video evidence of Colton Petoniak going to a local Ace Hardware store near the campus and buying bleach, paper bags, tape, things to clean up, obviously clean up a crime kit, we call it. And as that bore out, that was the case. Now, he was also apparently directed by Lauren Hall, his girlfriend, who was likely an accomplice in this, to go get these things at Ace Hardware, which he did. So needless to say, they're on the run. And the task force at the time, again, was in its infancy. I mean, its infancy. I mean, there were just a few marshals and a few APD officers, and one or two Travis County Sheriff's Office that were, okay, we got to focus on this case. And we contacted informants, we pushed out media bulletins, we conducted, obviously, who is Colton Petoniak, who is Laura Hall, who are they? Who they have, where are they going, and things of that nature. So what we typically do is we put border watches of what's going out on the north border and the south border. You know, we kind of knew what, and of course, this is pre-facial recognition. Okay, so we put border alerts on Laura Hall's call vehicle. And of course, you know, needless to say, within hours, I want to say, not maybe a day, her car was captured by camera, and of course, date and time, crossing. I want to say Eagle Pass of Del Rio. I'm not sure which Mexican town across the border she had crossed, but anyway, needless to say, we had a bona fide picture of her vehicle, of Laura Hall driving, Colton Petoniak in passenger seat. Now we got to bring in the Mexicans. Now we've worked a lot of cases with the Mexicans in my time there. And they're great to work with. When you need them, they're actually absolutely great because they use what's called the immigration system to get U.S. citizens back. You know, you have no status to be in Mexico, much like we deport Mexicans back to Mexico who have no status to be here. We use the Mexican immigration system to get our U.S. citizens back. That's what we use. But we had to find her. We had to find her, or we had to find Petoniak. Now, we only had a warrant for Petoniak. Laura Hall, she was dealt with later on some following charges of desecration of the body, I think is what she was charged with, according to my memory. But we were able to have our Del Rio office right there locally, who work with the Mexicans very frequently, made contact with their chain of command there in, I want to say it was Ciudad Acuña, if I'm not mistaken, right across the border. And they had the Mexicans agree, says, yeah, we'll try to find this green Cadillac, because that's the vehicle that was captured going across. And, you know, within hours, I want to say, they were able to identify that Cadillac and find it at a hotel there in Ciudad Acuña. Now, coupled with that, we also had, back then, pre-Facebook, it was called MySpace, if you remember. That was the only thing out there. We were able to deploy our electronic assets. Specifically, we want to know credit card activity, telephone activity, when a fugitive is on the run. We want to see so that we can track them in that manner. And MySpace at the time was, again, the only thing was the only social media tool out there. And Laura Hall got right into the hotel, and they settled in there, so that appointment, and she got right on MySpace. So some bells come out on our end. And that's how we were able to direct the Mexicans to help them out and at least get them to the hotel there. and they were able to actually visually observe both of them on the balcony, smoking away, and made entry later. They got a plan together, made entry, took them both into custody, brought them to the border, had a local Mexican immigration judge formally declared that they were persona non grata, an order of deportation was entered, and they were handed over to the marshals there in Eagle Pass or Doe, I think it's Eagle Pass. And they were deposited into, so that Colton Petoniak was deposited into the Merritt County Jail. Laura Hall, again, she didn't have charges till later, so she was allowed to be released at that time. Of course, as you know, you read the story, she was dealt with later. And of course, Colton Petoniak had his day in court. He got 55 years. He's sitting in TDC after several failed attempts of appeal. Is sitting in TDC doing 55 years. Also, Dennis Wayne Harvey, he was also convicted. Shrinklow guy. He was convicted in Williamson County because that crime occurred right on the Williamson County side, which is a good thing back then. You didn't want to get caught in Williamson County. Nevertheless, he got a life sentence. He got a life sentence out of that carjacking. So those are two big cases. Going into a third one.
Can I ask a quick
You
question?
sure can.
Okay, so in the Colton Petoniak, when you were doing his background checks, did you find instances where there were any red flags that he would be capable of this kind of violent act? Because it just seems like you said, he's an honor student, he's at UT, and then all of a sudden he commits this horrible crime.
Nothing in his back.
Nothing.
Nothing. He had a spotless background for the most part. His defense, as I recall, was that he even got on the stand and he even said, I might have done it, but and of course, it was a drug induced craze.
Oh, okay.
So he kind of used that as a defense, but he never quite, he didn't full mouth said I did it. He just said, I could have done it, but I just don't know. So,
Okay,
and they obviously tried to shift it over to Laura Hall.
of course.
That was that piece of that pie.
Yeah.
And she never really came out. Of course, she said she did it. She helped him with love. It was out of love that she helped him.
And that's my other question is, since she's seen driving the vehicle that, fugitive is in, wouldn't they maybe, think about charging her with obstruction or some other thing so they could arrest her on the spot?
They were, it's kind of, you've got to deal what you have in front of you. We knew we had a good felony homicide arrest warrant.
Right.
That was good then. They probably, that's my guess on the APD side, they probably didn't think that she was a significant risk now. They knew
Okay.
she wasn't going to go anywhere. She's probably going to go right back to home, which is what she did. I mean, she did everything everyone suspected she was going to
Okay.
do. And then as they start discussing
But she was very young.
yes, they just start discuss the elements with
Yeah.
the DA's office, then they started looking at potentially, I can't remember. I remember desecration was a big thing on the charge. Maybe there was
That
also.
doesn't seem like a very big charge, but it is a big charge. I mean, I don't know.
She
It
was,
just seems
she was
like-
exposed to a maximum of 10 years and she got here,
Oh,
which is,
okay.
tough, hard. It's
But they
unbelievable.
never charged her for helping him
I'm not sure.
escape?
I'm not
Okay.
sure if aiding and abetting
Okay, okay.
was part of the grand jury indictment. I'm sure it was.
Okay.
Just stack them on, see what you can get, see what sticks. And I-
That's so
Yeah,
interesting.
it's and if you ever look if she's been on national programs, kind of, they talk about this case with her, so she's been kind of,
As a
free
poster
about.
child of not following what your boyfriend does.
Or
whatever.
really, or why am I in jail? Because he did it kind of thing was also.
Yeah,
part of that,
oh, yeah, yeah.
You heard podcasts.
No, I
I
have
have
not.
not.
I have not.
There's a podcast of this case.
Ah.
It's called The Orange Tree.
The orange tree.
Rich Tree, Orange Tree Apartments. That's right.
Ah.
You ever heard of Paul Gilbert DeVoe? Paul
no.
Gilbert DeVoe III. I think you have when I talk about this. He's on death sentence. He's on a death, he's in the deaths. He's serving death. He got a death sentence. He's sitting in TDC waiting his date. He was charged back in, again, this was 07. So 05, 07 were a lot of couple of instances of violent cases here in Austin. DeVoe was from Marble Falls, originally from New York. He landed, he left New York and landed here in Marble Falls about 02, 03. And he essentially went into was having domestic problems, has a criminal history from this high from the ground. That's how long his criminal history is. He had a girlfriend there in Marble Falls, got a lot of domestic issues going on with his girlfriend. So she left the house and went to a local bar in Marble Falls. He follows her later on that evening as he's just thinking about it and getting madder and madder. Goes to a bar in Marble Falls called O'Neill's Tavern. And he pulls his weapon out, a gun, and he puts it right up their head and pulls the trigger and it jams. Does it again and it jams. He runs to the bathroom in that bar, and I presume he's trying to get the gun to work. And by that time, he comes back out, and the owner of the bar, the bartender, his name is Allred. Last name was Allred. He says, "Hey, okay, DeVoe, let's go. Let's get out of here." Boom, he shoots and drops him and kills him. Then he takes off in a truck belonging to the girlfriend that he tried to shoot. As officers are responding to the bar, again, DeVoe takes off and he goes to Jonestown. And he goes to the home of a former ex-girlfriend. And the former ex-girlfriend is home and she has a new boyfriend, and they're taking, each one of them have a child, teenager, girls. And they're going to Six Flags, I think, in San Antonio the next day on a Saturday. And DeVoe shows up at that house and kills all four. Takes off in that former girlfriend's vehicle. So he gets the vehicle that he had from Marble Falls, gets her vehicle, takes off. In the meantime, we get there, everybody's there. Every law enforcement agency you can think is there. Rangers are involved investigating it. Sheriff's office has principal jurisdiction because Jonestown is right in Travis County. And we get up based on exigent circumstances, we're able to get up on the victims' phones because they're missing and do the same thing. We plug in our electronic apparatus. We hear from DeVoe's mother, who's also from, I want to say, the New York area, Shirley, New York area. And she became aware of what happened because DeVoe had called her several times, and the family was even afraid of DeVoe now. They were concerned. So we suggested to them that they get out. And they went somewhere, at least for the interim period, they went somewhere to hide. He was using actually one of the victim's phones, so we were able to follow it in the direction of Shirley, New York, which is where he's from. So we alerted our counterparts there in New York. He says, "Hey, just want to tell you, this is what happened. He's killed 5 people at this point. Maybe heading your direction. Just have everybody ready." So while that's going on, again, MySpace. We didn't have Facebook back then. MySpace. DeVoe shows up at a friend of his house. Friend doesn't know any of this stuff happened back in Texas. DeVoe gets up on MySpace. Whistling bells go off here in Austin. We alert our New York counterpart. Hey, he's right there right now. Just got on MySpace, and essentially they approach the owner of the home. The friend says, "Yeah, he's in here right now." And of course, they get him out of the way, and DeVoe has that right here on his head. And after a brief encounter, he tosses the weapon and he's taken into custody. Now, if you look at his defense, we'll get to another point in a minute, but his defense was the snake. He had been bitten, he got bitten by a snake in Marble Falls where he lived. And he said that messed him up. That was why he went on his rampage. He's different. Anyway, when the house in Shirley, New York, where he was arrested, the girlfriend, the ex-girlfriend, the victim's vehicle from Jonestown was not there, was not in sight. They found a vehicle that had a Pennsylvania tag parked a little far away. So we said, run that tag and get to that house, wherever that vehicle was registered to. and it was registered to a lady by the name of Miss DeHart. And she was in her 80s. And it was right near the Delaware-Pennsylvania border, right on an interstate. And of course, fast forwarding, when DeVoe was trying to beat feet and get out of there, the car finally gave out right there in that location. And he gets out and trying to fix this car and he can't do it. And he just sees this little Miss DeHart in her front rocking chair in front of her house. And he makes a beeline for her, and she kind of sees something not right, and she gets up, gets into the house, and before she gets into the house, he grabs her, he shoots her, takes her vehicle, heads on to Shirley, New York. That's where that vehicle ended up. So that's victim number 6. So anyway, needless to say, fast forwarding, he's in Austin, has his day in court, has this defense about the snake bite. It was revealed he had a long criminal history, had women issues, domestic violence issues, always had a history of beating women. And I want to say the jury took a mere inside of 30 minutes to convict him. And he was sentenced to death. And his appeals, I believe, have been resolved at this point. So he's waiting on day to death.
I do have a quick question. If he had not, like the 4 people in Jonestown, if he had gagged them and bound them instead of killing them, would that have changed anything? He's already killed one person. Would that be a mitigating factor at all? Or is that pretty much like, okay, you've killed one person, so in his mind, you might as well kill everybody else? Or would
Well-
that be something a criminal might try to consider?
No,
not
no,
so
because he was already on that path, and it was like within hours. I mean, if you look at the distance between Marble Falls and Jonestown, it's a mere,
No,
whatever it may be, yeah. But what was interesting though, claiming he, the snake bite defense and all this other kind of stuff he was throwing out that would stick. I mean, he was very, very, lucid when he was calling his parents and his friends. This is what I did. This is what I did. So there's where that,
Did he say what kind of snake?
No, he didn't. Well, we assumed rattler, but I mean, he said it was the old snake bite defense, but it's the first I've heard that one.
Yeah.
Court TV was here. They covered that. I remember they covered that.
Yeah.
For the time being, that was here, but it's one of those cases where you wish in 2003 he would have just considered going somewhere else other than Texas.
Yeah.
Because he was a lifelong resident of New York, and all of a sudden in 2003 he decides to, pack up and come to Texas. So maybe you should have met him at the border and just say, go somewhere else.
And he had just gotten out of jail, you said?
No.
Oh,
No, that was the first guy,
oh, that was the first guy. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Dennis Wayne Harvey. But again, and Petoniak is only about yay high. He's not, we also threw out there the little man syndrome. But one of my deputies that was on the flight to bring him back on the DPS aircraft, we brought him back on an aircraft. He just wanted to go just to see what the devil looked like, eye to eye, just looking right into his eyes, and nobody home. Sometimes you run across those kind that just say,
It's amazing he made it so far.
Yeah. I mean, he just simply took off, hit the highway, and kept going. Of course, most of the time with fugitive cases, they have the benefit of time and distance, and and sometimes we lose that. We lose some significant time.
Yeah.
And we're behind the power curve all the time. Yeah, we can't predict when something's going to happen, but certainly we're behind the power curve all the time. And that old adage of they've got to be near perfect to continue this lifestyle. Now we just need to find that one mistake they make that you can capitalize on, that one little mistake, and they do invariably. That they do. Whether it's I think I'll just go 60 instead of 55.
Mhm.
So that doesn't. Cop pulls them over, or I'm going to come across the border. This is one time. Maybe that's it. That's the day. Or again, with facial recognition nowadays, it's everywhere. That's probably attributing to some close cases now. I would say DNA, genealogy. I mean, look at that. Look what we're seeing out almost daily in the paper. Where they're arresting somebody on a 20, 30-year-old cases now.
I'd love to see the yogurt shop murders solved.
Yeah.
And I was watching a program where one of the genealogists was said that there was another case, and they said they only had a spot of blood the size of a gnat's eyelash. and I know that's the criticism or the inability to work the yogurt shop murders, but it seems like if, this one person's saying they only had that tiniest drop of blood, maybe, we could finally get that
Get that one.
case solved.
It's, technology in that area is just gonna get better. It's
Yeah.
just gonna get better, and maybe, 20 years from now, we're talking now. Remember those guys? They were arrested back in, we'll probably be at a point where there'll be an announcement of arrests, of actual, holding someone accountable that actually did those cases, but that's still a conversation still being had, just what if, or what could have, or what can we do? There are
Yeah.
a lot of cases like that.
Yeah.
that-
And I know it's because they had a fire, so they had to go in and actively put out a fire. And
And they
that's
lose a lot.
what they talked about, destroying the evidence that they needed to solve the case.
Yep, those are those critical elements.
Yeah.
The next case is Angela Harkness. You'll like this, you'll Google this. If you Google this, and you'll like the whole story. But in a nutshell, Angela Harkness was charged and convicted for fraud. And what her and a bank vice president, Wells Fargo bank vice president, concocted a scheme for him to create the loans, approve the loans, and for her to have all her 9 sisters be the loan, have loans taken out, each one of their names, including the mother, to the tune of way over $1 million after all this was done. What they did with those funds is they created a NASCAR team here in Austin. And of course, it was, you got to pay, like anything else, you got to pay the notes, but you got to make money to pay the notes to keep the scheme going. Of course, the sisters and the mother didn't know loans were taken out in names. Angela was also Iranian national. Her original name, her real name is Fatima Karamkhani. She was the youngest of 9 siblings that relocated to Austin after the overthrow of the Shah in Iran. Father was in the military. He settled here in the Austin area. They ran a string of beauty shops, hair cutting salons here in Austin, San Marcos area, Round Rock area. And Angela, the youngest, spent her time as an exotic dancer. I'm being nice, as an exotic dancer at the Yellow Rose. She had done that, and that's how she met the bank VP. So as this plan is going forward, they're arrested by the FBI. Angela agrees to provide evidence and essentially snitch on the bank vice president. He gets 4 or 5 years in prison. Angela's going to get a sweetheart deal of probation. They just slap on her wrist and she's going to be off on her merry way. But she decided to take off and run. She takes off and run. She's very attractive. Very attractive. Now, the backstory. Eventually, she picks up the phone and calls him from Abu Dhabi. We knew she had been in Abu Dhabi for a couple of years. We had informants in Abu Dhabi that were telling us and providing us pictures. How she looks like, where she works, where she lives, this is her phone number. So we had everything except an extradition treaty. So without that, you might as well just forget about it. So what we did, we tried to do everything we could to make her uncomfortable in the UAE and keep her landlocked so that she tried to leave. We would be alerted. She would try to get a visa. We would be alerted. The Canadians, for example, would deny her visa based on an Interpol arrest warrant that we had issued. So she was landlocked. We were trying to make her uncomfortable. She eventually gave up and said, "Hey, I'm ready to come home." We put her on a flight from Abu Dhabi to JFK, where she was officially arrested and brought over to Austin, and she eventually got 40 months out of it. Now, the backstory, all the little details. Angela was previously married in California. She was also an exotic dancer in California. She was married to a lawyer who was a judge in California. And they had a kid. And the kid's name, the victim, the husband, the ex-husband, his name is Dion Harkness. Dion Harkness died by self-infliction wound in a hotel in Palm Springs, where apparently him and Angela were in that hotel arguing. There was evidence that Angela was there because of a couple of fingerprints, obviously fingerprints, but there were two people in that room. And Harkness had scratches on his face at the time. And there was discussions, reports of previous physical abuse done by Angela against Dion Harkness. They had a child, a girl. And her name was Leisha May. Leisha she was 3 or 4 years old at the time. Angela took her abroad when they fled. Now, so there was always that question about whether it was suicide or not from the Palm Springs perspective, because they wanted to talk to Angela when we ever got her back here. So by the time that Angela fled with the child, Dion's parents, they live in Kansas, they got a court order to get full custody of Leisha May upon her return. So that was in the background, hidden back here, so that when when Angela arrived in JFK, New York, they took Angela in custody, and the New York CPS authorities were there to take custody of Leisha May, give her to the grandparents, and was raised by the grandparents as far as I know. Grandparents have since died. Leisha May now in her 20s. Angela did her 40 months. Back then, before ICE, they were called INS. INS filed a detainer. They wanted a discussion with her because we were able to determine early on that Harkness was previously married in California, where she was an exotic dancer. She married someone out there, a parolee, that we allege was done for immigration purposes, the sham marriage. So Angela had all this stuff in the background. And she just had a personality that claimed she was a police officer, a teacher, and she was everything but an exotic stripper dancer. And that was a big thing about, how she was able to lure men into these, powerful men, essentially, that had, the ability to raise money. Bank vice presidents were her targets. But in doing so, they also retained a NASCAR team that was, up there. Michael McLaughlin, you ever heard of him? I'm not into NASCAR, but he's a famous race car driver. They retained him, and they retained some significant sponsors because they thought of this racing team, which was new, was an exotic racing team because the bank VP was an African American and Angela was a female Iranian. So they said, "Oh, this is the next great thing here to NASCAR." Then the checks started bouncing. But one of the sisters, when Angela was arrested, she was put on bond and allowed to report to pretrial supervision pending her case. As she was out on bond, she was also having plastic surgery done, change her appearance. And when Angela fled, well, she had at least 2 to 3 week head start on us. And we started piecing all the pieces together, putting all the pieces together to include the home where she was residing. We went ahead and hit the sister's trash. So we yanked all the trash as she was started every Monday morning. We took it back to the office and went through it. We found a letter from Angela to the United Arab Emirates requesting that they vouch for her cosmetology background, cosmetology license that she previously had in Texas. So that's where our first piece that kind of directed us, okay, that's where she's going. And then, of course, make a longer story short, we tried to get the UAE authorities to grab her and give her back to us because of the international arrest warrant that we went through Interpol to get. And as a result of not having an extradition treaty, it's kind of like, it's up to the diplomats at that point to try to negotiate something like that if it can be done. So bottom line is, she went ahead, we didn't touch her for a year, but we had an informal providing us all the details we needed just to keep her going, just to know where she's at all the time. Actually, she met an Iranian construction worker there in Abu Dhabi. He was from Australia. He was an Australian national. They were going to get married and live happily ever after in Australia. And that's where we just kept locking her down. She couldn't get to Australia because of that Interpol red notice. She gave up, calls and says, "I'm ready to come back." So after 2 or 3 years of this, we were able to close this case. She got her 40 months. And immigration got a hold of her because they were gonna, again, talk to her about this suspected marriage. And of course, if you are convicted of a felony offense, that could be grounds for deportation. Of course, that would be obviously to her home country of Iran. My understanding is that did not happen. She ended up doing her time and being released here somewhere in Texas. And the last I heard was that her daughter, it was an strange relationship, and she ended up again being raised by the grandparents. I don't think they ever reunified after the fact, going forward after that event.
I mean, you have to wonder how bad living in Abu Dhabi would be
Well-
to call and turn yourself back in.
It's, well, if you're not a native
Uh,
of the UAE, life is even tougher. Because I
Yeah.
think, 60% of the population in the UAE are not even nationals. They're foreigners doing the work, the domestic work, the actual construction. So, and the other 40%, the actual nationals, I think they're, all recipients of oil revenue and or own oil or have a piece of it. So it's a wealthy country for the nationals, the natives of the UAE. Everybody else is just temporary worker, or guest. So yes, it was tough, but we did see activity. And to go a little deeper in that, we did actually identify the sister that she was living with in Round Rock at the time. She was out on bond, drove her across the border to Mexico at Chihuahua and El Paso, because we have those capabilities of following traffic. And she entered into Mexico. Angela got on an airplane from Chihuahua, Juarez, and eventually landed in Tehran. And was, according to her, she was kept there for a couple of weeks. I think they suspected that she was a spy,
mm,
but they debriefed her, interrogated her. I'm being mild.
mhm.
And then she was on her way to Germany, and then she ended up going into the UAE. But she always had to get out of the UAE every 90 days. So we also followed that traffic, but she would go to Tehran and come back, turn around a day, and go right back to the
Was her
UAE.
sister charged for
No,
driving her?
no. We tried to inflict as much pain in the form of threats, because sometimes that's what we've got to do to try to get somebody to. But once we held that over her head, to the very end, we held that over her head. We could always, and we could have always done that, but we get, because why? Yeah, we should have probably done something just to reinforce that, there are laws and there are charges, and this is what happens. It's hard to get a conviction, in my opinion, when you start charging a mother, you start charging family members, because then you got to sit as a jury member. Well, would I have done the same thing if I was in that case? And it just takes one.
I must be a mean person.
Um,
Back to convict.
The last one, you'll like this one. Swami Prakshanadad Saraswati, a mouthful. But I think you may have heard of this one out of Hays County. He was the Swami that was charged several years ago with child molestation, because he was head of that Marsana Dham temple that's right over there in Driftwood, over there by the barbecue place. Kind of familiar with that? Well, the place has changed its name, miraculously it's changed its name, but it's the largest Hindu temple in the United States. But at the time, Saraswati had been involved leader of the internet. I had to write this down, the International Society of Divine Love. And of course, if you read about this, he took in people. Some people characterize it as a cult, but essentially it was, if you're to include the parents, they felt, you had to give to Saraswati, the Swami. And of course, part of that was given to the kids, giving their kids up, daughters. He was an 86-year-old man. He's probably dead right now. But I don't know. Sometimes they're like roaches. They just live forever. You just can't get rid of them. They live forever. But he has fled. Well, let me backtrack. He was out on bond, on $1 million bond. Now he had some heavy-duty financial clients that put up his bond, and he would come to court, but very elaborate. The robes and the entourage and all this, and a special seat in the courtroom because his back would hurt. He'd fly first class, and he was from India. So he kind of, the concern was from the courts is, do we detain him or do we let him out on bond? Because obviously the DA obviously saw a flight risk issue here. but the court allowed him on again, it was a several $1 million bond. And some of these offenses had occurred many years prior. So maybe, it's kind of one of those things, from the DA's perspective, at least they felt they had a good case, but you got to look at, why didn't you come earlier? If you're sitting on the outside looking in, why didn't you bring these to the attention to authorities earlier? So needless to say. And this story has also been picked up by The Hunt from John Walsh. There was a program called The Hunt. It was also featured several years back. So it gives you it has the victim statements or victims interviews in there. It's actually a good piece if you ever can still find this, called The Hunt. But fast forwarding, he was in trial. He was showing up to trial, and I think it was quite obvious it was not looking good for him. And they had a meeting of the minds one evening and decided, let's get him out of here. And they sent him to Mexico. Across the border in Laredo. He stays in Laredo for a couple of days. They call court. He doesn't show up. Bench warrants issued for his arrest for failing to appear. We get involved, start looking at this case. Now, we had already caught him once, by the way. Earlier on the original charge, he was coming in from India to Dulles. We snatched him there, flew him back here to Austin. He was arrested or produced in front of the court here in Hayes County, and that's when the judge released him on that multi-million-dollar bond. So we caught him once. Now he's out on bond, he's failed to appear. Now it's the second time going after him. Again, the benefit of a couple of days, he's got extensive financial resources. He can practically go anywhere. His passport wasn't surrendered. So, good luck. And it was good luck. It's to this day, it's still good luck. He has not been held to account. He was sentenced to 14 years in absentia. And to this day and time, he has not been formally arrested. We do know that he is back in India. Just prior to my retirement, after the Hunt, John Walsh of The Hunt profiled him, we did get some pictures that satisfied me, at least from the community there in India where he's at, that he's there and they just don't want anything to do with him. That is the local authorities. They know he's a religious figure, and it's kind of one of those things, out of sight, out of mind. We have not, back then, we weren't getting the assistance from law enforcement there in India to get his arrest. And a lot of it, again, I'm sure it was well his age. He's old. He's a significant religious figure here in India. He's been sentenced. He's an old man. What are you going to, kind of. So nothing ever happened on that front. We did have an international Interpol red notice to leave man locking in there, but they pretty much, from my understanding on my way out when I retired, that they just he's also a persona non grata even in India within that Hindu religion. So he's been thrown out essentially. They changed the name of Barsanadam to it's now referred to as Radhamadab Dham. Okay, and business continues. That is untrue. To some degree, there's pictures. When I visited that place and we were looking for him, I mean, they had pictures and paintings of him just all over the place. And he was again revered as, just touching, can call God the Lord anytime. That's their perception of his followers that they had of him. So and obviously we weren't getting any assistance from any of the followers. We were going to have to find some weak links. And there were some of these victims that said, you know what, they became 18, 19, 21. They said, I'm out of here. Parents stayed there and the parents were castigated. I mean, they just got, didn't consider their daughters anymore. Just mere fact that they left the cult. So yeah, a lot of problems over there. Yes, sir.
Out of curiosity, there's quite a controversy up in Blanco County. One of the individuals put up in excess of $1 million for this fellow. Then he applied foul and he's trying to get his money back. I was just wondering if he ever got his money back, was it still confiscated?
Typically it's confiscated. At some point in time, the DA's office will push forward with formal forfeiture, and that money goes right into the coffers of the court. So it's an incentive, but they actually kind of keep it dangling out there just as an incentive for those that posted the bond. You know what? You want that money back. It's your money. You want it back. Tell us where he's at.
Does the judge, or do you or your office, does the judge ever ask y'all's opinion before like they let this gentleman go without even forfeiting his passport when he'd already run once?
No, no, I mean, really, the judge has to consider two things. One, flight risk. Sometimes it's a no-brainer, you would think, and the
Mhm.
second is dangerousness of the community. If you allow him to remain or her to remain in the community, does that person pose a danger? Sex offenders, those charged with sexual assault, serious significance, I'm talking about the serial types,
Mhm.
those are kind of as an example of what you would keep in jail, not even consider flight risk. But sometimes, going after them 2 or 3 times, 4 times, it's not, I want to say it's not. It's unusual, but it does happen. There are just instances where you just kind of scratch your head. Do you really extend your resources a second time? In the tune of manpower, overtime, hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars. I mean, how far do you go where you kind of say, you know what, we got 50 other cases that are, a little bit more.
Do we have
central.
an extradition treaty with India or do we not? Or we do, but they just didn't want to
That's
touch
correct.
this one?
And that's the unique thing about extradition is even though we have extradition treaties, we don't always give our US citizens to Mexico. Do we really want to do that? Countries that, don't have a similar system as we have, we don't give ours away. No, the short answer is no. Now, when you have an extradition treaty, let's just say, let's throw as an example with Canada. Let's make this simple. Essentially, you look at a few things. You can't, if you have charges in 5 jurisdictions, but we're only interested in getting you back from one, for that one charge you're facing here in Travis County, you can't do that. You have to throw everything on the table. And when you throw everything on the table, now you're dealing with 5 district attorneys that want their pound of flesh. And who gets them first? And the thing is, ADA may want, harsher sentence, maybe looking at a harsher sentence than another DA. So they're going to have those internal discussions because they're going to have to agree. If we want this person brought back, we got to agree. All these charges got to be considered because you can't come back and charge them later for something else. You can't do that. You can't do that. And you only get one bite of the apple. So it's ultimately going to be up to the judge in Canada whether they're going to let you come back, return you back to the United States. If they don't, if let's say for some legal reason that a Canadian judge doesn't see any merit to returning you back to the United States to face charges, they can't come back a second time and bite that apple. So essentially, you can come back later to the United States. So it's strategic, they're tough, they're long, they take a long time. And then of course, we're talking about, Canada where English is easy, but you're talking about, Japan, other countries where there's maybe you have to have a literal translator that's, certified and everything's got to be,
So you're saying that sometimes law enforcement might opt to keep something on the books, but if the person's out of the country, wait until they try to come back.
Yes, because the other opportunity we have is if they're a frequent traveler and they go to a friendly country, another country, the other country may just decide, yeah, here. In fact, we're not even going to use the extradition process. We're going to use the immigration process and deport you. Now, we've had instances like that where, let's say, we're looking for a Colombian national wanted on a dope charge here in Texas, and they may decide to bounce him back to a third country, Panama. And then the Panama saying, you don't belong here, you belong in the United States. And they say United States, and it's all, So there are ways you can, I won't say get around, but there are.
Sounds like a moving target, like
It
it's
is.
gonna always change.
It is,
Yeah.
it is, it is. And now with, social media, with technology, it's tougher. It's even tougher to find people nowadays because you can VPN has been another problem. I'm
So
sure.
that does bring up something you talked about at the very beginning, someone who goes into the WITSEC program, are they told they can't have any social media presence or how does that
They're
work?
essentially told at the front end to have, well, again, I was there pre-social media.
Right.
You pretty much, you tell them no contact, no contact with where you came from.
Right.
That's hard. That's
Yeah.
right. That's in writing. That's in stone. And of course, the consequences are, if we find out or it's discovered,
Mhm.
you're out. we give you the paper and we said, here, we'll cut you from the program because you violated, number 2, you went back. Here's the evidence to support that. Fine. And sometimes you get,
We have a question
Yep.
online also about the witness protection program. They asked, is a person in the protection program ever considered safe to get in touch with family members if the bad guy after them dies?
there are, well, you can get in touch with them.
You can feel free to unmute if you want to say something. Yeah. I think I got it right.
Well, just think of this instance, for example. Here's another instance. Let's say you get the principal. Let's just say it's the husband. He's the crook. The wife is just, didn't know anything. And they have kids. Now, he's gone into the program, and you got the wife and the kids standing back. They're not in danger, say. And how does the father meet the kids? And how do you have that? Or if they're divorced, or even let's put it this way, they're divorced. Now there's a formal custody arrangement. Now we're gonna have to that custody arrangement is gonna have to be changed to give full custody to the wife, because it just can't work.
So does someone in the witness protection program, do they get a new identity and they get jobs? Do they work in the
Question.
program?
Yes. Yes to all those questions. Yes to all those questions. Yes.
But they
they're
can't use their
expected.
skills and certificates that they had
That's correct.
prior to the
That's correct.
crime, so they have to get job, kind of more menial, less professional
In
jobs, I'm
some
assuming.
instances, but in the case of if a professional, yes, they're probably gonna have to do something different, because there are agreements and arrangements with 50 states to wash things, to change things. So, again, an attorney or an accountant may end up being a butcher,
Right.
as an example. Most of these people have not had job skills. They don't have any job skills. They were, bookies, or they were assassins, or whatever they were. They have to learn to work, and that's a problem too, because they never worked before.
Right.
They've also had a multi-million-dollar lifestyle.
Right.
All of a sudden, they're getting a mere penance. They don't have the same lifestyle they had
Right.
before. It's the Department of Labor sets the standard for what a family of 4, 6, 8, depending on dependents, what they're going to get monthly, and that's the handout they're going to get for life. And yes, they have to work. They're expected to work. Now, granted, there are some charity cases. It's just not. You're getting the great grandma that's 80 and can't work, and she's sick. Those are charity cases. You're just going to have to probably fund those for life.
And like you mentioned assassin, but we wouldn't really put an assassin in the witness protection program, would we? I mean, this is someone who's gone out and actively killed someone, whether it's at someone else's,
Have you ever heard I can't confirm or deny?
no, but I guess that's what you're saying.
Same with the bullet in the witness. Well, that's right. You can't.
I have no idea.
You have no idea, but he came out and said that he was.
Who?
John Gotti's.
Oh.
Yeah, same with the bull Gamato.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, okay, well, it just seems like that would be someone you would say, no, you cannot go into witness protection because you've shown skills to commit bad crimes.
I'm glad I'm-
People who committed crimes and
Yes.
ratted out the person above them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I always thought it would be more like the bookkeeper or the accountant.
Bigger fish.
Watching too much TV. Watching too much TV.
I know.
Yes, sir.
Is it more and more difficult to disappear today?
Yes. Oh, is it more difficult? It's
I mean, just to play.
It is. There's, I mean, there just to a few things out. Fiscal means, the financial means to really,
Well, I'm talking about
sustain.
identity and all this stuff and, I mean, Whitey Bulge had disappeared for almost 20 years. And he had the financial resources, but, he was also, Whitey was a very intelligent guy, there's no question about it. But, I'm just wondering, is it just possible? I mean, between facial recognition and, the difficulty of getting a passport or a license and this, that, and everything else, has it become more and more difficult, or is it possible to go out there and buy this stuff?
But I mean, look at all, like during COVID, everybody wore masks. Facial recognition is not gonna help find people
You're right,
then.
you're right, but with everything, you can probably still go to a street corner and get you a driver's license. Or a couple of them for a few $100. That may get you, that may, sustain you for maybe a year, and then you're gonna have to get something else. I mean, at some point, you're just gonna have to stay on top of your movements, because with facial recognition, phone, we live with phones. But there's always that tracking, there's always that,
And a lot of.
What
things
happened
are
if you
cashless.
get out to the cemetery?
Oh, good point.
If you get out to the cemetery and,
I've had a case like that where a couple, a mother and a son, they went to a cemetery and they both got replacement birth certificates
person,
to, consistent with their ages, and were able to sustain themselves for a while. Sure can.
I
That's,
think Forrester, the English writer, quite a story in reference to this. For an individual just going down to the graveyard and going down to the courthouse, and then after he got his license or whatever, he just kept on getting more and more documents to substantiate a false identity.
that's right.
Can you talk more about the mother and son? Why would a mother be
It was an-
willing to?
What happened was there was a Coast Guard call out in the coast of Oregon
Hmm.
of a boat that went aground and crashed. They couldn't find the bodies, and the bodies were actually that husband and that son and daughter, the son and mother. It was an insurance claim, is what it was, multi-million-dollar insurance fraud claim scheme. They ended up in Denver, using a postal. It's called postal, et cetera, post boxes, et cetera, post box, but they were using the private mail system, private mail box to, generate their mail and things of that nature, but they kept a very low profile. You couldn't find, because you didn't know their real names, you couldn't get their real driver's license, you didn't know who they were. So that took a lot of manpower, surveillance, because they would pick the box. This is pre-cameras now, so they would go to their mailbox. We found the mailbox, but we were, 24 hours, we can't be there 24 hours to watch the mail. So it was just hit or miss till we finally got them, but.
So
that's what it
the
was.
mom and the son were the ones who were killed in the boat wreck, and so who was left to claim the insurance?
The mother, it gets better. The mother was a twin, actual twin. And the twin sister part of it. Oh, yeah, it was a good scheme for, 10 years, I want to say they were on the run.
Wow.
And they were actually to live that lifestyle for 10 years.
What's the average length of fugitive status to apprehension? Roughly.
I would say, I would say 3 to 5 years. And it depends on how, where do the investigators prioritize these cases? I mean, really, some are here, and some are way out here. Some are career changers, I mean, they just are.
What's the record that you know of?
Oh, I mean, you can catch.
Well, I mean, the long record.
Oh, the long term?
Yeah, the long record. Boulder's got 20 years,
I would say probably a long term is 10 years. When you're actually looking at, we've had cases still where they're assigned, they get pushed to another investigator just for get a different set of eyes to look at it. 'Cause, that's the benefit of a task force. You just get somebody to look at it. What did I miss? He or she may find that. I guess
Do you
before-
remember in the insurance case, how much time that they got when they were caught?
7 years.
So that's a
federal time.
that's
Well,
pretty,
The Coast Guard wanted their pound of flesh because they spent millions of dollars sending
right.
Coast Guard boats. So that was, I think, kind of pushed by Coast Guard as well, Inspector General. Of these 5 cases that I kind of briefly talked about, Dennis Wayne Harvey, Colton Petoniak, Andrew Harkness, Paul DeVoe, and Swami.
Mhm.
I'll share this with you. At the end of the month, I'm going to LA and I'm going to film an interview. It's been in the works for about a year and a half on one of those cases. It'll come out in the next, I don't know, I guess I'll find out more at the end of the month when it's actually going to come out. But again, it's kind of a testament to everyone having an interest in docudramas, and old
Mhm.
cases, kind of what's out there right now, 48 hours, that kind of thing. So anyway, I won't tell you which one because of an NDA, but I told you. Podcast, I've got a podcast that's where the Marshal Service here in Austin, they're getting the old guys come back to talk about some of these cases that we talked to you about today. So even the podcast is picking this up. Chasing Evil is the name of the podcast.
Is it all Texas?
No,
Okay,
no, it's
okay.
nationwide.
Okay.
Apparently this producer has an agreement with headquarters DC
Mhm.
to kind of go around the nation, kind of flush out some of these old cases that may have some interest in some of these. So like you all.
If you guess out of the entire population of the United States of who is committing a crime at any one time, what would your estimate be?
Who is committing a crime?
Like out of the whole population?
Like what percentage
Yeah.
of people are
Yeah.
committing crimes
Yeah.
at any given time?
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
I mean, yeah, every day are we
I guess
speeding? Are
that's
we
true.
speeding?
Well, that's true. Okay. Like you said, if they went 60, they'd get pulled over.
Right.
We all usually think, oh, 5 miles over, I'm safe. Yeah.
Do you remember? Well, no. That's too old a case. But I was saying all these old crime cases that are coming, that everybody wants to be part of or listen to or talk about. I mean, that to me, I'm kind of fortunate on one end to have been part of that. Of course, there's victims tied to each one of these cases, that family members are continuing to deal with, or they, finally, came to that closure, maybe not want these wounds reopened again, but, I just certainly want to impart that this is what law enforcement does. This is one component of law enforcement that chases bad guys and girls, as you can see. They're time consuming. We're always behind the power curve in these cases, but we try to address the most violent murders, rapes, robberies, sexual assaults, domestic. I remember when I was in the Marshal Service, every October, October was National Domestic Violence, and we go after nothing but our targets would be domestic violence. And anybody who had a warrant for domestic violence, that's who we went for. One particular month, we go after all parolees. We just go saturate the community going after parole violators. You got to hold these people to account, and just now, granted, you only have so much jail space, and and everybody's going to get out at some point in time. Everybody gets out, so you have to pick and choose. And now, right now, just in this climate that we're in, where we're losing a lot of law enforcement officers, they don't want to be law enforcement officers anymore. The vacancy rates are very high. It's just something we're going to have to deal with till we get over this hump.
Is the Marshal Service suffering the same kinds of impact from, things that police officers are right now?
I would say not, and this is why. One, we're a small agency, about 3,000, give or take. There are 100 applicants for every one vacancy, so we don't have a problem filling it. Our problem for maybe people leaving is that was subjected to mandatory retirement at 57. We all kind of feel we got a few more years to go. They tell you day one when you come in, at 57, you're out the door. So that going in. So you kind of still think you could do it a little bit longer. That kind of, attributes to an exodus.
I did not know that.
Well, that's for all federal agencies, to include also air traffic controllers, federal firefighters, subjected to mandatory retirement. Now, we talk about this, if I can, 5 minutes more, and I'll let you go. This is about what I do now. Okay, we're talking about what we did. Let's talk about what I do now. In 2015, Judge Julie Kushner in Austin, as you know, got shot at her driveway coming home, right? We all know that. Okay. The legislature created my position, the office of, within the Office of Court Administration, which is a small state agency that the judiciary statewide in various things. Well, one thing added to their plate was court security, and they hired me for that position. I was on my way out the door because I was approaching 57, and took this position over. And pretty much what I do is provide a consultative role, advisory role in trying to institute best practices, what I learned from the Marshal Service and working in federal courthouses, in trying to improve court facilities in this statewide. From the municipal courts, the justice of the peace courts, district courts, historic courthouses, judicial annexes, whatever they call them nowadays. We have over almost 4,000 judges that wear a black robe in Texas. We have a election system. We don't have a unified court system. So if you all have been to various counties, you see the level of security from one county to another. Some don't exist, some is very elaborate. But anyway, we're trying to get to a perfect place where we're having the commissioners courts, the funding authorities, or the city council to start, placing some emphasis on implementing some form of security in courthouses. Because I remind them that failing to act is going to be your Achilles heel. And part of what I do is I assess courthouses. I look for vulnerabilities in courthouses based on my experience. What's good, bad, and indifferent. And we're talking about policies or a lack of policies in some courthouses. What do they do? What do employees do if there's an active shooter? If there's a violent encounter, if there's a shelter in place, a weather event, a toxic spill because you have a train track across the street. These are all the things that I, discuss and encourage those authorities, the judges, the court staff, the sheriff's office, to start implementing some written policies. Because when I write my report and provide it to the judges, it's in writing. It's a neutral third-party perspective. I don't have any skin in the game in that particular county. I'm leaving and going to the next one. But the point is that, those recommendations, again, per the National Center for State Court Best Practices, this is how courthouses should look like. Now, granted, it's a funding anything else. It's a local, security at a courthouse is funded at the local level. And some counties are affluent and some are just struggling just by the mere nature of their budgets. So we encourage them to start changing the culture of the courthouse, the things that don't cost. Instead of having 4 open doors in a courthouse, shut them down, everybody come in through one door. That doesn't cost anything. There's political capital there, but I always also remind them too that court security enhancements come at the cost of blood. So much, someone gets hurt or someone dies or blood is spilled, and miraculously all this stuff shows up tomorrow, right? Cameras, an officer at the front door, X-ray. It looks like TSA, right? It's got everything, facial recognition. So I'm reminding them to start doing something, just do something to change the culture of, that, well, that's the way it's always been. Or what if I spend, the taxpayer's treasure on cameras? How does that implement security? Okay.
Are those public documents?
Security, supposedly there's an AG opinion out there that says, anything that has to do with security of a court
Okay,
facility, or
okay.
there's an exemption for that.
I was thinking of the trains carrying toxic chemicals.
Yeah, that's.
That would be good to know.
It would be very good to know. And how do employees react to
Yeah.
that? Where do they go? What do they do? And I'm seeing there's just nobody's at home.
Right.
Nobody's taking care of the home. So those are the kind of things that I come into counties and cities and try to address.
Well, and, definitely someone who has all the experience of the police or marshals or detectives solving crimes. I'm glad they're making use of people with that skill set. It's not the same as a firefighter, which is a much more physical job. And then there was another one you said had to retire, or the airline travelers. I mean, I kind of do
The
want them to
traffic
retire. But a detective seems like you kind of want that skill set to, want to keep using it.
Well, there's strategies and programs in place, or sometimes the law itself doesn't permit a law enforcement agency to hire a re-employee to do it. So then we end up ranching, doing something else. But anyway, the whole point is, yes, they retire you early under the theory that your body is just sustaining a lot of damage over the years, adrenaline dumps and all that kind of bad eating habits, that kind of thing. And it you ain't got much longer to live anyway. Just go ahead and enjoy your few years of that. So, I mean, it's a weird way to look at it, but I mean, there may be obviously some truth to it. Your heart takes a beating, plaque, all that kind of good stuff, and go enjoy. So, but yes, I see exactly where you're coming from, and that's what a lot of people feel they can. You got a few more years left. Anyway, yes.
In your opinion, did Epstein kill himself?
I have to go with it. I mean, I'd have to go with that. I mean, I've been in a lot of federal prisons and I've been in a lot of detention centers and there's too much movement going on and too many cameras and, and I just say, yeah, I think it did. There's not much to it. That's my view.
Okay, thank
you. Yes, sir.
Out of curiosity, did they set up Whitey Bulger? When they put him in prison, they sent him to a maximum security prison,
I'll tell you what. No,
and he somewhere old me with heart problems.
I don't think so. I don't think it did, but the prison system, much like any local jail system, it's the best, it's better than Facebook, social media, or cell phones. They can get information around and pass through. It's a calling tree. It's a natural calling tree. I mean, they know who's coming in the door. You from the outside just got arrested before, anybody else does. And how do they know this? It's in my years, I've seen a very elaborate.
You think we should continue to have privatized jails, or do you think it would be better to bring them back under the, government?
I've had experience with both. Private jails have a purpose. They really do, because a lot of county jails are restricted to jail standards and what those standards may be. Private jails are not, unless they are holding state prisoners. So we use them for federal prisoners a lot. You don't have to deal with a lot of bureaucracy. Let me give you an example. You want prisoners or attorneys or whoever, they're complaining that we need a basketball court out there to let the inmates, blow some steam off. Okay. Well, if you ever try to do that through county government, local government budget, there's no money. But private, it's up there the next day. So there are a lot of benefits to make selfishly to make our lives easier. We want video conference equipment. Go get the latest, greatest video conference equipment so we can prevent transporting prisoners that don't need to come to court, that we could probably take care of it in a custodial environment. County may not, it may take a year or two to get to that point. So there's that natural, just takes forever as now. On the local side, on the privatized side, I think you're probably more prone to corruption because you pay, you get what you pay for. And a lot of just the transient nature of a correctional officer at the private level, probably wanting to be a police officer or a correctional officer at the state level, county or state level. So yeah, it boils down to you paying for what you get. Now you pay per prisoner, you probably pay pretty much the same because you have to be consistent and be able to justify putting prisoners in a private setting as opposed to taking them to your local county sheriff. So obviously per diem, per head is a consideration. Maybe private prisons are willing to transport and do extra things that the county can't or won't. Those things you got. And of course now the sheriff obviously in any county would be well within his or her right to say, hey, you got to take care of us first. Which is true. You got to take care of your counties first. And then again, simply put, local county may just not have the room. The jail's too small. They've already exceeded they're busting out at the seams. So you go to a private prison. You have to go to a private facility. Does anyone know when the Marshal Service was established? What year? It's the oldest law enforcement agency. There you go.
Wow.
Because you answered that right. I got it. Let's see what else I can come up with.
Awesome.
Let me see if I can ask what offices was I stationed at?
San Antonio, Houston.
Wow.
That's 2 out of 4. Well, that's the 2 out of 5. That's 2 out of 5. Oh, you said
1789.
Thank you.
I'll give him one virtually.
No, he was saying the date.
Just trying to come up with some quick questions.
Well, I was thinking Hayes.
There you go.
Oh,
Well, El Paso.
No. Brownsville, McAllen, Washington, Denver.
Oh, okay, okay.
Let's see now, when was the Lone Star Fugitive Task Force created?
2005.
Yeah, that's right. That's what you
But I
said.
already do.
That's what you said, yeah.
I'll give you a second one, but you gotta give that one away.
Now I have to come up with a question.
Just trying to think of questions. Okay, I got a couple of these more. Let me come up with quick questions how many victims did the boat kill?
6, 4, 5, 6.
Only the first one. Um.
Are there any fugitives that you all are searching? I guess, I mean, I don't know, maybe you can't say. Are there any fugitives that y'all are searching for, like right now? Like who's the biggest fugitive you're looking for? But you're doing the court thing, so
Yeah,
you're not really
I
paying
have no
attention.
idea.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'll come up with the last question. If you know this, okay, originally in 1789, in George Washington,
Mhm,
when you had the first 13 colonies, right? You had 13 marshals appointed by the president. Each
Mhm.
marshal is appointed by the president to serve at the pleasure of the president. Typically, whatever party's in power. Every time there's a change of party, there's a change of a marshal.
mhm.
Okay, so there's 13. How many there are now? How many of the
Equal to the number of federal judicial.
You said there were 93?
Said the number.
But I can't, no.
It is 94. Yeah,
Okay,
because you did say it, yeah.
okay, here's the last one. There are, trying to get this one. There are 4 judicial districts in Texas, okay? So out of the 94, 4 of them are in Texas. Western District, Northern, Eastern, and Southern.
Mhm.
Where are the locations of district headquarters? Each district?
Dallas,
Each
Houston, San Antonio.
Yeah, that last one will get you 4 meters.
Marfa,
I guess I'll pass it.
Amarillo,
Oh, you got 3 out.
I know, that 3 or 4. We were National League with that.
would it be in East Texas?
That's
We haven't covered East Texas yet, so what would be East Texas? What would be a good town in East Texas?
I did it 3 out of 4.
It's Tyler. So
Oh,
that's all-
Tyler, Tyler.
All right, well, I am done. I took way too much of your time.
Well,
more than
thank you
anything.
so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. So afterwards, we're going to take him for a bite to eat. If anybody wants to join that, you pay for this. You have to pay for yourself, but we'll.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you
And
next
yes,
time.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming.